Under the dim hum of the generator, the briefing room felt smaller than usual. Metal walls sweating under desert heat, fluorescent lights flickering just enough to make silence heavy. Lieutenant Commander Mara Voss sat straight-backed at the far end of the table, her uniform still dusted with grit from the night's extraction. Around her, the team looked anywhere but at her. The mission had been successful. 2 hostages recovered, all units accounted for. But Captain Eric Laird didn't look like a man celebrating success. His eyes carried something colder, sharper. He paced slowly, folder in hand, his voice calm but clipped, the kind of tone officers used when they wanted control more than clarity. "You deviated from protocol, Commander," he said, not looking up. That detour through the south corridor wasn't in the brief. The air thickened. Mara didn't answer right away. She knew the moment she spoke, this wouldn't be about tactics anymore. It would be about control. So she chose her words like stepping through a minefield. "Sir, the north route was compromised. I made the call to save time and lives." Simple. Direct. Correct. But Laird's jaw tightened, and that was enough to tell her truth wouldn't matter here. The others sat stiff, waiting for dismissal, desperate to escape the tension slicing the room. When he finally released them, chairs scraped and boots shuffled out fast, leaving only the 2 of them behind. The door shut, a metallic echo that lingered too long. Mara didn't move. Neither did he. They stared at each other across the table, an invisible current between them, his authority, her defiance, both held in perfect stillness. Outside, a dog barked somewhere near the perimeter fence. Inside, neither spoke. But every second of silence said what words didn't. This wasn't over. The knock came sharp and clipped, more an order than a request. "Commander Voss, my quarters." Now, before we step inside that locked room and see what really happened behind the chain of command, take a second to hit that subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from. Every perspective matters, especially when loyalty and truth are on the line. His tone carried no space for misunderstanding. She followed in silence, boots echoing down the narrow corridor lined with peeling paint and the smell of oil. Inside, the air felt close, too still. When the door clicked shut and the lock turned, something shifted in the room, an invisible tightening of space. Captain Laird stood by his desk, the lamplight cutting across his face in harsh angles. The pretense of professionalism evaporated with the sound of that lock. "Let's clarify your version of events," he said, leaning forward, voice low but venomous. His eyes didn't search for truth, they hunted for weakness. He accused her of diverting from orders for personal gain, of collecting intel for someone else. The words came like practiced lines, as if fed to him by another hand. There was something brittle beneath his authority, an edge of desperation she hadn't seen before. Mara answered with calm precision, her words measured in millimeters. "Every move I made was to protect the team. The data we recovered was secondary." She could feel him circling, his breathing uneven. She'd seen that look before, not in officers, but in suspects under interrogation. The more control they lost, the louder their need to assert it. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the metallic tang of adrenaline on his skin. "Don't lie to me," he hissed. She didn't flinch. Her silence wasn't defiance, it was discipline, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. The seconds stretched, thick and unbroken, until he slammed his palm against the desk, the sound splitting through the room like a gunshot. Papers jumped, a pen rolled to the floor. For a heartbeat, neither moved. His chest heaved, her expression unreadable. In that trapped silence, something fundamental shifted. The room no longer felt like command and subordinate. It felt like predator and prey, and both of them knew which role he'd just chosen. The silence after the slam lingered like the echo of an explosion. Laird's breathing steadied into something darker, measured, deliberate. He reached down, opened the drawer beside his knee, and pulled out a combat knife. Black steel, 6 inches, SEAL standard issue. She knew the model by weight, by balance, by memory. He didn't raise it, just set it on the desk, letting it spin once across the wood, the light catching on its edge before it stopped, pointing toward her. The gesture wasn't random. It was a message dressed as a test. "You've forgotten your place," he said, voice low, the authority stripped of all command. The knife gleamed between them like a border. She didn't move. Her pulse slowed until each beat became a calculation. The air thickened, her focus narrowing to the geometry of survival. The desk, 3 feet wide. 2 steps to the door. He was right-handed. Shoulder tension high, dominant stance uneven. The blade's reflection flickered in the laminated map pinned to the wall, terrain lines bending with the motion of his hand. Every breath became data. The hum of the generator outside masked the subtle creak of his boots as he shifted weight forward. A droplet of sweat traced down his temple, caught in the glow of the desk lamp. He wasn't threatening for control. He was begging for confirmation of it. The kind of man who confused silence with fear. Her mind divided the scene into frames. Distance to reach, leverage point at the wrist, nearest improvised weapon, metal thermos, half full, top left shelf. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "You're not thinking clearly, Captain." It was less a plea, more a warning. He gripped the handle then, blade up, a soldier's instinct corrupted into menace. The movement fractured time itself. The room seemed to slow, every detail sharpened to glass. The knife caught the lamplight again, flaring like a signal in the dark. She saw the exact flex of his forearm muscle, the intent traveling through his fingers before it reached the blade. 1 heartbeat. 2. The sound of the generator faded behind the rushing of blood in her ears. She didn't blink. Fear was there, yes, but behind it, something colder. Calculation. The switch had flipped. The hunter was awake. The lunge came without warning. A blur of movement, muscle and panic fused into instinct. The knife flashed, cutting the space where her throat had been half a second earlier. She had already moved. 1 step to the left, pivoting off her back foot, her hand snapping to his wrist before thought could form. The angle was wrong for him, perfect for her. The momentum he built became his undoing. She twisted, redirected, and slammed his arm down against the corner of the desk. The crack of bone against metal split the silence. The blade slipped from his hand, skittering across the floor, spinning once before coming to rest beneath the map. Elbow, dislocate. The words weren't spoken aloud, only recited in the rhythm of her training. Her forearm locked across his joint. The pop was muffled by his grunt. Palm strike, stun. Heel of her hand met his jaw, head snapping sideways, balance gone. Transition, choke. Her arm looped around his neck, not to kill, not even to punish, but to finish. Controlled pressure. 6 seconds. That's all it took. He hit the ground hard, breath stripped from his lungs, body spasming between fight and surrender. She didn't move for another second, keeping weight on his shoulder, her breathing steady, eyes locked on the fallen knife. Then, release. She stepped back, exhaled once through her nose, and keyed her radio. Medical to CO quarters. Now, no tremor in her voice. No victory either. The door burst open moments later, 2 operators first, eyes darting from her to the captain on the floor. One of them froze when he saw the knife, the blood along the desk edge, the calm in her stance. "He's hurt," she said evenly. "Secure the weapon and get a corpsman." It took a beat for them to move, as though their minds couldn't reconcile the image. Their commanding officer gasping for air while the woman he'd just accused stood composed, sleeves rolled, face unreadable. Her eyes met theirs once, not to explain, but to anchor the room back into order. Protocol over chaos. The captain tried to speak, jaw slack, voice barely a rasp. She didn't look down at him, not out of disdain, but because pity was dangerous. Pity blurred judgment. And judgment was the only thing keeping this room from collapsing into rumor and ruin. When the medics arrived, she stepped back, hands visible, tone clipped and factual. Self-defense. He initiated with a weapon. I responded with necessary force. The corpsman nodded, already cutting open the captain's sleeve to examine the arm. Outside, the corridor had gone silent. Every operator in the base would know within minutes. But she didn't care about the whispers. In the space where adrenaline usually lived, there was only calm. The kind that came after surviving something meant to end you. The kind only earned through restraint. Justice had arrived, not through anger, but through control. The command tent smelled of stale coffee and dust, lit by a single strip of fluorescent light that hummed like a warning. Lieutenant Commander Maravas sat across from a panel of investigators. Uniforms crisp, expressions unreadable. The questions came sharp, clinical. You assaulted a superior officer. Confirm. Her reply was steady. I defended myself against an armed threat. No tremor, No embellishment. Just truth, delivered in the language of procedure. They pressed harder. Did anyone witness the altercation? 2 operators arrived after. They can confirm weapon presence. A pause. Pins scraped across paper. Every second stretched long enough to test patience. The room carried the weight of accusation, the familiar imbalance of power where truth has to earn permission to be believed. Then, midway through the session, a signal officer entered quietly and handed over a tablet. One of the investigators scanned it, eyes tightening. Something shifted. He whispered to the colonel at the head of the table. The tone changed, not visibly, but perceptibly, edges softening where there had been suspicion. "Lieutenant Commander," the colonel said finally, looking up. "We've just received confirmation from Signals Intelligence. There were encrypted transmissions traced to Captain Laird's account, outgoing to a private contractor network operating out of Dubai." The room fell silent. He was selling classified movement data. Your extraction team was one of the targets. Mara didn't move. She had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it aloud carved a strange calm into her chest. The knife hadn't been about control. It had been desperation, the last reflex of a man cornered by his own betrayal. The colonel's gaze held hers. "You didn't just defend yourself. You stopped a breach that could have cost American lives." He leaned back, voice lower now. "Your restraint may have saved this unit." The investigators exchanged glances, the energy in the tent shifting from scrutiny to respect. The same officers who had entered seeking fault now looked at her differently, not as a suspect, but as a soldier who had walked the razor's edge and chosen discipline over rage. Outside, dawn was beginning to bleed across the horizon, the first lights slipping under the tent flap. For the first time since the night began, she allowed herself a breath that wasn't measured for survival. The system had caught up with the truth. Justice, though late, had found its mark. The sun was climbing slowly, washing the desert in muted gold, when Mara finally stepped out of the command tent. The night's tension still clung to her uniform, but the air felt different now, lighter, though not quite free. She sat on a low concrete barrier near the perimeter, elbows on her knees, hands loosely clasped. Her fingers didn't shake. They hadn't since the knife hit the floor. Only her eyes showed the weight of it all, the long silence that follows when survival no longer needs to be loud. No celebration, no satisfaction, just reflection. The hum of the generator had faded into the waking sounds of the base. Footsteps, clipped radio chatter, the metallic clink of gear. The world kept moving, indifferent to the fact that a storm had passed in the room behind her. The narrator's voice seemed to echo from somewhere deeper than memory. The hardest fights aren't against enemies. They're against the people who were supposed to stand beside you. The ones you trusted to watch your back while you faced the chaos outside the wire. Those battles cut quieter, but they cut deeper. Mara turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the first convoy tracks were already carving paths through the sand. The mission, the command, even the investigation, all of it would become classified reports, redacted lines, whispers in secured hallways. But the lesson would stay. Discipline isn't what keeps you from breaking rules. It's what keeps you from breaking yourself. Footsteps approached from behind, measured, deliberate. She didn't turn. A shadow fell beside her, and a fellow SEAL stopped, silent for a beat before offering a crisp salute. No words, no explanation, just acknowledgement, the kind that carried more meaning than praise ever could. She returned the gesture slowly, the motion small but resolute. When he walked away, she stayed seated, letting the rising light touch her face. It wasn't triumph she felt, it was clarity. Some wars end with explosions. Others end with a breath, a sunrise, and the quiet understanding that strength isn't proven in battle, it's proven in restraint. By afternoon, the tent had emptied. The investigation team was gone, the base settling back into its rhythm as though the night had never happened. Mara folded her gear with quiet precision, each motion deliberate, the ritual of a soldier resetting her mind. The duffel sat open on the cot, half filled with the life she carried from one mission to the next. No medals, no keepsakes, just the essentials. A runner appeared at the flap, breath short, envelope in hand. "For you, ma'am. Eyes only, Joint Task Command." The seal was waxed in crimson, the weight of it unmistakable. Orders like that didn't come through channels. They came from somewhere higher, somewhere that noticed the ones who did their jobs too well to ignore. She held the envelope for a moment, thumb tracing the embossed insignia, before tucking it into her pack unopened. The contents didn't matter yet. The message already did. You're not done. Outside, the rotors of 2 helicopters began to churn the sand into spirals. The horizon blurred in the heat, the air vibrating with purpose. She tightened the straps of her pack and looked toward the sound, the pulse of movement, of duty calling her back. The voiceover came low, reflective, carrying the echo of hard-earned truth. Sometimes the enemy wears the same uniform. Sometimes you have to keep fighting anyway. She started walking toward the flight line, the rising wind lifting strands of her hair. Decision made. The mission never really ends, it just changes names.